The story of a bullied teen helping an elderly lady cross the street, never knowing she's his long-lost grandma, began on a rainy Tuesday in October, when the universe conspired to reconnect two souls separated by decades of silence and misunderstanding. 17-year-old Noah Bennett hunched his shoulders against the cold drizzle, his worn backpack clutched tightly against his chest, not to protect his books from the rain, but to shield the fresh bruises blooming beneath his thin t-shirt. The school hallways had become a battlefield, and today he'd lost again. His fingertips traced the edge of the torn notebook page in his pocket, where someone had scrawled "nobody" in thick black marker across his class photo. The rain intensified as Noah reached the busy intersection near Oak Ridge Park, the traffic lights casting alternating red and green glows across puddles that mirrored a world he felt increasingly disconnected from. His home was just 3 blocks away, but it hadn't felt like home since Dad left and Mom started working double shifts. The apartment would be empty again tonight, cold, silent except for the hum of the refrigerator that contained little more than condiments and his mom's energy drinks. Noah's eyes burned, not from tears. He'd trained himself not to cry in public years ago, but from exhaustion. 3 years of being the new kid, the quiet kid, the kid whose clothes never quite fit right had worn him down to a shadow. The crossing signal blinked white, and Noah stepped forward mechanically, his gaze fixed on the cracked sidewalk ahead. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman stood at the curb, one spotted hand gripping a wooden cane, the other clutching a plastic shopping bag that strained against the weight of its contents. Her gray hair was plastered to her forehead from the rain, and she peered at the crossing signal with obvious uncertainty. Noah noticed how her body trembled slightly, whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Something about her hesitation made Noah pause. His instinct was to keep walking, to maintain the invisible barrier he'd built between himself and the world. But the woman took a tentative step forward, then froze as a car honked impatiently. Before Noah could overthink it, he found himself moving toward her. "Do you need help crossing?" His voice came out raspy from disuse. School days often passed without him speaking more than a handful of necessary words. The woman looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something Noah couldn't identify, but that made his chest tighten strangely. "Oh, that would be wonderful, dear," she said, her voice warm despite the chill in the air. "These intersections get more frightening every year. Or perhaps it's just these old eyes of mine." Noah offered his arm awkwardly, surprised when her hand grasped it with unexpected strength. Her fingers were cold, but there was something steadying about her touch. "I'm Margaret," she said as they stepped off the curb together. "Noah," he replied, automatically adjusting his pace to match her smaller steps. The crossing signal began flashing its warning, and Noah felt Margaret's grip tighten. Without thinking, he shifted to place himself between her and the closest lane of traffic. "Don't worry," he found himself saying. "We have time." They reached the opposite curb just as the light changed. Margaret released his arm with a gentle pat that lingered for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Noah. Such a nice name," she said, studying his face with an intensity that made him look away. "Would you?" She hesitated, then gestured to the plastic bag. "Would you mind helping me get these groceries home? It's just that block there, the brick building with the green awning. My hands aren't what they used to be." Noah glanced at his watch. His empty apartment would still be empty an hour from now. "Sure," he said, surprising himself. "I can do that." Margaret smiled, and for reasons Noah couldn't explain, the rain felt slightly warmer. The brick building with the green awning turned out to be Willow Gardens, a modest apartment complex for seniors. Noah carried Margaret's groceries up to apartment 307, noting the faded wallpaper in the hallway and the smell of lemon polish that reminded him vaguely of something from his childhood. Margaret's apartment was small but immaculate. Plants crowded the windowsills, their green leaves stretching toward what little daylight filtered through the rain clouds. Photos in mismatched frames covered nearly every surface, though Noah was careful not to look too closely at them, feeling like an intruder. "Just on the counter is fine, dear," Margaret said, hanging her rain-spotted coat on a hook by the door. "Would you like some hot chocolate? It's the least I can offer for your kindness." Noah should have said no, should have mumbled an excuse and retreated to the familiar isolation of his own life. But the apartment was warm, and the scent of cinnamon and old books reminded him of a time before the bullies, before Dad left, before Mom's eyes grew distant with worry. "Okay," he said, setting the groceries down carefully. "Thanks." Margaret moved slowly around the tiny kitchen, filling a kettle and retrieving mugs from a cabinet. Noah noticed she favored her right side, wincing slightly whenever she turned too quickly. "Are you hurt?" he asked before he could stop himself. Margaret paused, then offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just old bones complaining about the weather. Nothing that won't pass." Noah nodded, recognizing the deflection. He used the same technique when his mom asked about the bruises he couldn't hide. The hot chocolate was made from real chocolate melted into milk, not the powdered mix Noah was used to. Margaret added a dash of cinnamon and pushed a blue ceramic mug toward him across the small table. "So Noah," she said, settling into a chair opposite him, "tell me about yourself." The question was simple, ordinary even, but Noah couldn't remember the last time someone had asked it and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. He stared into the swirling chocolate, searching for a response that wouldn't reveal too much or too little. "I'm 17, he began cautiously. "I go to Oak Ridge High, junior year." Margaret nodded encouragingly. "Do you enjoy school?" The truth, that school was daily torment, that walking through those doors each morning required more courage than anyone knew, stuck in his throat. "It's okay," he said instead. Margaret studied him over the rim of her mug, and Noah had the unsettling feeling she could see right through his practiced nonchalance. "I was a teacher for 42 years, she said. "High school English." "I've seen that it's okay look on many faces." Noah shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, school. You know, I do know," Margaret said softly, "and I know that sometimes just school can be the hardest place in the world." Something in her voice, understanding without pity, made Noah's chest constrict. He took a quick sip of hot chocolate to hide the sudden trembling of his lips. "They don't hit me much," he found himself saying, the words tumbling out before he could catch them. "Mostly it's just words. Shoving. Stupid stuff." Margaret's hands tightened around her mug. "Words can leave the deepest bruises," she said. "The ones no one else can see." The simple truth of her statement hung in the air between them. Noah felt a crack forming in the wall he'd built so carefully around himself. "Yeah," he whispered. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain tapping gently against the windows. Noah noticed a book of poetry on the table, its pages marked with colored tabs. "You like poetry?" he asked, eager to shift the focus away from himself. Margaret's face brightened. "I do, very much. Do you?" Noah hesitated. His love of poetry was something he kept hidden, like a secret self that wouldn't survive exposure to the harsh light of his daily reality. "Sometimes," he admitted. "We're reading Walt Whitman in English now." "Ah, Walt." Margaret smiled, reaching for the book. "I am large, I contain multitudes, one of my favorites." She opened to a marked page and slid the book toward Noah. "This one always spoke to me during difficult times." Noah read the highlighted lines silently. "Not I nor anyone else can travel that road for you. You must travel it by yourself. Keep going." Margaret encouraged. "It is not far. It is within reach. Perhaps you have been on it since you were born and did not know." Noah's voice grew steadier as he read. "Perhaps it is everywhere, on water and land." When he looked up, Margaret was watching him with a strange intensity, her eyes bright with what might have been tears. "You read beautifully," she said. With feeling. Noah felt his cheeks warm. "I like how words sound," he admitted. "How they fit together." "Do you write?" Margaret asked. The question touched something raw inside him. The journal hidden beneath his mattress, filled with scribbled verses and half-formed thoughts, was his most closely guarded secret. "Not really," he lied. Margaret nodded, but her eyes told him she knew better. "Well, if you ever do, I'd be honored to read it." Noah finished his hot chocolate, acutely aware that he'd already stayed longer than politeness required. Yet something about Margaret's quiet apartment, with its plants and books and absence of judgment, made him reluctant to leave. "I should probably go," he said finally, rising from the chair. "Thanks for the hot chocolate." "Thank you for your help, Noah," Margaret replied, walking him to the door. "Perhaps," she hesitated, "perhaps you might help me again sometime? These old legs don't navigate the world as easily as they once did." Noah recognized the gentle fiction for what it was, an offer, not a request. A bridge extended toward his isolation. "Sure," he said. "I pass by here most days after school." "Wonderful. I often need help with groceries on Thursdays," Margaret said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "And I always make too much soup on Fridays." Noah felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest, the faint warmth of connection. "Okay," he said. "Thursday then." As he stepped back into the rain, Noah realized his shoulders weren't hunched anymore. The weight hadn't disappeared, but somehow it had shifted, becomes slightly more bearable. Thursday found Noah standing outside Willow Gardens, hesitating at the entrance. Part of him, the part conditioned by disappointment, expected Margaret to have forgotten their arrangement or to greet him with the cool indifference he'd grown accustomed to from adults. But when he finally gathered the courage to buzz apartment 307, Margaret's voice came through the intercom immediately, warm with what sounded like genuine pleasure. "Noah, come up, dear. I'm just getting my shopping list together." In the elevator, Noah caught his reflection in the polished metal doors. The bruise under his right eye had faded to a sickly yellow, a parting gift from Jason Mercer when Noah had refused to hand over his math homework. He'd told his mother he'd walked into a door. She'd nodded tiredly, already late for her shift. Margaret didn't mention the bruise when she opened her door, but Noah noticed how her gaze lingered on it momentarily, how her smile tightened at the edges. "I thought we'd try Murphy's Market today," she said instead. "They have the best fresh bread on Thursdays." The walk to Murphy's took twice as long as it would have if Noah had been alone, but he found he didn't mind. Margaret pointed out small details he would have missed. A cardinal's nest in the park, an intricate iron fence design, the first crocuses pushing through the soil in a neighbor's garden. "Life reveals itself in the details," she told him. "The grand gestures make for good stories, but it's the small moments that make a life." At the market, Noah pushed the cart while Margaret selected items with careful deliberation. She knew everyone: the butcher who saved the leanest cuts for her, the produce manager who called her professor, and always found the ripest avocados, the cashier who asked after her health with genuine concern. "You're popular," Noah observed as they left, his arms loaded with bags. Margaret chuckled. "Not popular, just present. I've shopped here every Thursday for 20 years. People notice consistency." On the walk back, Margaret asked about his classes, listening intently as Noah cautiously shared his love of literature and history, his struggles with chemistry, his ambivalence toward the required physical education that too often became another venue for humiliation. "I was terrible at sports too," Margaret confided. "My son was the athlete in the family. My grandson too, I imagine, though." Her voice trailed off, a shadow crossing her face. "You don't see him?" Noah asked, then immediately regretted the question as pain flickered across Margaret's features. "No," she said softly. "Not for many years." Noah wanted to ask more, but sensed the boundaries of their new friendship. Instead, he adjusted the grocery bags and changed the subject. "I read more Whitman last night," he offered. "The part about the astronomy lecture." Margaret's expression brightened. "When I heard the learned astronomer," she quoted, "when the proofs, the figures, were ranged in columns before me." Noah continued, surprising himself by remembering the lines. "Until rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself." They finished together, in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time, looked up in perfect silence at the stars. They shared a smile that felt like a secret handshake, an acknowledgement of understanding that transcended their difference in age. Back at her apartment, Margaret insisted Noah stay for tea and cookies. While she arranged everything on a tray, Noah found himself drawn to the photographs he'd avoided looking at during his first visit. One in particular caught his eye, a family portrait from perhaps 30 years earlier. Margaret, her hair still mostly dark, stood beside a tall man with kind eyes. In front of them was a younger man, perhaps in his 20s, with a serious expression and Margaret's distinctive eyebrows. "My husband James and our son William," Margaret said, noticing Noah's interest. "That was taken at William's college graduation." "You look proud," Noah observed. "We were," Margaret said, a complex emotion coloring her voice. "James passed 10 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden." "I'm sorry," Noah said automatically, though the words felt inadequate. Margaret nodded her acknowledgement. "William and I, we lost touch. A disagreement that grew into a silence too deep to bridge." She touched the frame gently. "Life is too short for such silences, but sometimes we realize that too late." Something in her story resonated with Noah, the sense of disconnection, of words unsaid. He thought of his own father, who had walked out 3 years ago and now lived across the country with a new family that didn't include Noah. "My dad left," he found himself saying. "He calls sometimes, but it's like talking to a stranger." Margaret's eyes met his, filled with a compassion that made Noah's throat tighten. "Loss comes in many forms," she said quietly. "Sometimes the people we lose are still walking around in the world." They drank their tea in a silence that felt companionable rather than awkward. Before Noah left, Margaret pressed a book into his hands, a collection of Mary Oliver poems. "For when the world feels too sharp-edged," she said, Return it whenever you're ready, or keep it if it speaks to you. Noah traced the worn cover, touched by the unexpected gift. Thanks. I'll take care of it. I know you will, Margaret said, with a certainty that warmed him all the way home. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to Noah's life that had been missing for longer than he cared to admit. Thursdays became grocery days with Margaret. Fridays often found him at her kitchen table, sharing the promised soup and fresh bread. Some days they talked, about books mostly, but occasionally about deeper things. Margaret's teaching career, Noah's uncertain future dreams, the small daily wounds of living. Other days they simply existed in the same space. Margaret tending her plants or working on crossword puzzles while Noah did homework or lost himself in one of the many books that filled her shelves. The comfortable silence was as healing as their conversations. At school, little changed. Jason Mercer and his friends still found ways to make Noah's days miserable. His locker was vandalized with crude drawings. His gym clothes disappeared. Anonymous notes appeared on his desk. Nobody wants you here, and disappear already. Yet something had shifted inside Noah. The words still hurt, still dug into places tender with old wounds, but they no longer defined him completely. In Margaret's apartment, surrounded by poetry and plants and the scent of cinnamon, he was someone else, someone with thoughts worth hearing, with a presence that brought genuine pleasure to another person. It was a fragile lifeline, but Noah clung to it, nurturing it with weekly visits that gradually increased in frequency until he was stopping by Margaret's apartment almost daily. His mother noticed the change in his routine, but seemed relieved rather than concerned. "It's good you're making friends," she said vaguely when he mentioned helping an elderly neighbor with errands. Noah didn't correct her assumption that Margaret lived in their building. Something about this new relationship felt too personal, too precious to explain. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Noah had stayed late at school, working on a history project in the library to avoid running into Jason in the parking lot. By the time he left, the sky had darkened with approaching storm clouds. He hurried toward home, planning to drop off his backpack before visiting Margaret as they'd arranged. The rain began just as Noah reached the corner near Oak Ridge Park, the same intersection where he'd first met Margaret 6 weeks earlier. Fat droplets quickly became a downpour, soaking through his jacket and plastering his hair to his forehead. Noah was about to cross when he spotted a familiar figure on the opposite corner. Jason Mercer, huddled under the inadequate shelter of a store awning, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable without his usual entourage of followers. For a moment, Noah considered turning around, finding another route home, but the rain was coming down too hard and he was already drenched. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the crosswalk, hoping Jason wouldn't notice him. The universe had other plans. Halfway across, a car sped through the intersection, hitting a massive puddle that sent a wave of dirty water over both Noah and Jason, who had just stepped off the curb from the opposite direction. "What the?" Jason sputtered, wiping water from his face. His eyes narrowed as he recognized Noah. "Look what you did, freak." "I didn't do anything," Noah said, backing away. "It was the car. Always excuses with you." Jason advanced, his fist clenching. Always hiding, always running. Noah felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinctive urge to make himself smaller, less visible. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was Margaret's voice in his head, quoting Whitman. "I exist as I am. That is enough." Instead of retreating, Noah stood his ground. "Leave me alone, Jason. I'm just trying to get home, same as you." Jason looked momentarily taken aback by Noah's direct response. For 3 years, Noah had dodged, avoided, escaped, but never confronted. "You think you're tough now?" Jason's voice held a note of uncertainty beneath the aggression. "No," Noah said honestly. "I think we're both soaking wet and having a terrible day. And I think whatever problem you have with me isn't worth standing in this rain." A crack of thunder punctuated his words as if the sky itself were emphasizing his point. Rain streamed down both their faces. Jason stared at him, confusion warring with habitual anger. "You're still a nobody," he said finally, but the words lacked their usual venom. "Maybe," Noah acknowledged, "but I'm a nobody who's going to go get dry now." He turned and continued walking, shoulders straight, expecting at any moment to feel Jason's hand yanking him back, a fist connecting with his jaw. Nothing happened. When Noah glanced back from the next corner, Jason was gone. The encounter left Noah shaking, not with fear, but with a strange, unfamiliar energy. He had stood his ground. He had spoken his truth. The world hadn't ended. Still trembling with adrenaline and soaked to the skin, Noah headed straight for Willow Gardens. He needed to tell Margaret what had happened, needed to see in her eyes the confirmation of what he was beginning to suspect, that he was stronger than he'd believed. When he reached her building, however, something was wrong. An ambulance stood outside, lights flashing silently in the rain. Noah's heart stuttered as paramedics emerged from the front entrance, guiding a stretcher toward the open ambulance doors. Margaret lay on the stretcher, her face pale but conscious, an oxygen mask covering her nose and mouth. Noah dropped his backpack and ran forward. "Margaret," he called. What happened? Are you okay?" The paramedics paused and Margaret's eyes found his. She reached up with a trembling hand and pulled the mask aside. "Noah," she whispered. "My boy." "What happened?" Noah repeated, looking frantically between Margaret and the nearest paramedic. "Are you family?" the woman asked, her expression professionally sympathetic but firm. Noah faltered. "She's my friend." "Please, what's wrong?" Margaret reached for his hand. "Just a little fall," she said, her voice alarmingly weak. "And some chest pain. Nothing to worry about." The paramedic replaced Margaret's oxygen mask. "We need to get her to Memorial Hospital for evaluation," she explained to Noah. "If you're not family, you can meet us there. Visiting hours end at 8. Noah felt helpless as they loaded Margaret into the ambulance. "I'll come," he promised. "I'll be there soon." Margaret nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving his face until the ambulance doors closed between them. Noah stood in the rain, watching the ambulance pull away, its siren cutting through the storm as it turned onto the main road. His momentary feeling of strength evaporated, replaced by a cold, hollow fear. In just 6 weeks, Margaret had become the most stable presence in his chaotic life. The thought of losing her made breathing difficult. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called his mother. For once, she answered. "Mom?" he said, his voice cracking. "I need help." 30 minutes later, Noah sat beside his mother in the emergency room waiting area, still in his damp clothes, leg bouncing with nervous energy. "So this is your neighbor?" his mother asked, confusion evident in her tired eyes. "From our building?" Noah swallowed hard. The lie had seemed insignificant weeks ago, but now it felt like a betrayal of both his mother and Margaret. "Not exactly," he admitted. "She lives here at Willow Gardens. I met her weeks ago, helping her cross the street. She's been kind to me." His mother studied him with an expression Noah couldn't interpret. "You've been visiting an elderly stranger and didn't tell me." "She's not a stranger anymore," Noah said defensively. "She's my friend, maybe my only real friend." Something in his voice must have conveyed his distress because his mother's expression softened. She reached over and squeezed his hand, a gesture so unexpected that Noah nearly pulled away. "Tell me about her," she said. So Noah did. He told his mother about Margaret's love of poetry, her teaching career, her plans and stories, and the way she listened as if his thoughts mattered. He described their Thursday grocery trips and Friday soup dinners, the books she'd loaned him, the conversations that had gradually rebuilt his sense of worth. "She makes me feel like I exist," Noah finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like I matter." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Noah," she said. "You've always mattered. I'm so sorry if I made you feel otherwise." Before Noah could respond, a doctor approached them. "Are you waiting for news about Margaret Whitley?" Noah stood quickly. "Yes. Is she okay?" The doctor's expression was carefully neutral. "Are you family?" "No, but I'm sorry, but I can only discuss her condition with family members." Noah felt a surge of frustration. "She doesn't have family here. We're the closest thing she has right now." The doctor hesitated, then relented slightly. "Miss Whitley has had a mild heart attack. She's stable now, but we're keeping her for observation and running tests." "Can I see her?" Noah asked urgently. "She's resting," the doctor said. "And as I mentioned, our policy is family only for cardiac patients." Noah's mother stood up beside him. "Please," she said quietly. "My son has been visiting Miss Schwartz Whitley nearly every day. She's important to him. Just 5 minutes?" The doctor looked between them, his professional detachment wavering. 5 minutes, he conceded finally. "Room 318. But if she's sleeping, don't wake her." "Thank you," Noah said fervently, already moving toward the elevator. Margaret wasn't sleeping. She lay propped against white pillows, looking smaller and frailer than Noah had ever seen her. But her eyes brightened when he appeared in the doorway. "Noah," she said, extending a hand toward him. "You came." Noah crossed to her bedside, carefully taking her hand in his. An IV line trailed from her arm, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. "Of course I came," he said. "You scared me." I'm sorry, dear. Just this old heart playing tricks again. Margaret's smile was weak but genuine. They say it's minor. I'll be fine. Noah wanted to believe her, but the hospital equipment and the pallor of her skin told a different story. The doctor said they're keeping you for tests, he said. Margaret nodded. Just a precaution. I've always been healthy as a horse. She squeezed his hand. Now tell me something good. How was your day before all this excitement? Noah hesitated, then told her about his encounter with Jason in the rain. Margaret listened intently, her eyes growing brighter with each word. You stood your ground, she said when he finished. Not with fists, but with truth. I'm so proud of you, Noah. The simple praise washed through Noah like warm sunlight. I thought about what you said, about existing being enough. Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Sometimes I think you've taught me more than I've taught you. A nurse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, but visiting time is up. Ms. Whitley needs her rest. Noah reluctantly released Margaret's hand. I'll come back tomorrow, he promised. Right after school. I'll be here, Margaret said, probably complaining about the food. Noah smiled despite his worry. Save your strength for Thursday. We have grocery shopping to do. As he turned to leave, Margaret called after him. Noah, would you bring my photo album when you come tomorrow? The blue one on my coffee table? I'd like to show you something. Sure, Noah agreed, curious but not wanting to tire her with questions. Rest well, Margaret. His mother was waiting in the hallway, talking quietly with the doctor. They fell silent as Noah approached. Everything okay? He asked, immediately tense. Yes, his mother assured him. We were just discussing visiting hours. I've explained our connection to Miss Whitley. The doctor agrees you can visit outside regular hours if you don't stay too long. Noah looked at the doctor in surprise. Really? The doctor nodded. Messy is. Whitley mentioned you when she was admitted. It seems your visits are important to her well-being. He cleared his throat. Just keep them brief and respect the nursing staff's instructions. I will, Noah promised. Thank you. On the drive home, his mother glanced at him periodically, as if seeing him for the first time in years. I need to stop by Margaret's apartment tomorrow, Noah said as they neared their building. She asked me to bring her photo album. I'll drive you, his mother offered. Before my shift, Noah looked at her in surprise. Really? She nodded, her eyes on the road. I'd like to see where you've been spending your time. Maybe meet this Margaret properly when she's feeling better. You'd like her, Noah said with certainty. She's special. His mother reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. She must be to have brought back my son's smile. The next day, Noah and his mother visited Willow Gardens together. The building manager, concerned about Margaret, gave them access to her apartment after Noah explained their connection. The apartment felt strangely empty without Margaret's presence, though her plants still reached for sunlight and her books stood in neat rows on the shelves. It's nice, his mother commented, looking around the small space. Cozy. Noah headed straight for the coffee table, where the blue photo album lay just as Margaret had described. He picked it up, then paused, noticing a folded piece of paper beneath it with his name written on the outside. What's that? His mother asked, coming to stand beside him. Noah unfolded the paper, finding a note in Margaret's elegant handwriting. Dear Noah, if you're reading this, I've asked you to bring my album to the hospital. There's something I've been meaning to share with you, but finding the right moment has been difficult. Perhaps there is no perfect time for such revelations. The album will explain much. Bring it to me and we'll talk. With love, Margaret. Noah stared at the note, a strange feeling of anticipation and dread mingling in his chest. She wants to tell me something, he said, half to himself. His mother peered over his shoulder at the note. Sounds important. Yeah. Noah carefully slipped the note into his pocket and picked up the album. We should go. Visiting hours start soon. At the hospital, Noah found Margaret looking slightly better than the previous day. Some color had returned to her cheeks, and she was sitting up in bed, glasses perched on her nose as she worked on a crossword puzzle. Noah, she greeted him warmly, setting aside the puzzle. And you must be Noah's mother. I'm Margaret Whitley. Karen Bennett, his mother replied, stepping forward to shake Margaret's hand. It's nice to meet you. Noah has told me how kind you've been to him. The kindness has been mutual, I assure you, Margaret said, her eyes moving to the album in Noah's hands. You found it. Noah nodded, setting the album on the bed beside her. And your note. Margaret's expression grew serious. Karen, would you mind if Noah and I spoke privately for a few minutes? It's rather personal. Noah's mother looked surprised but nodded. Of course. I'll get some coffee and come back in a bit. Once they were alone, Margaret patted the edge of the bed. "Sit with me, Noah." Noah perched carefully on the side of the bed, his curiosity mounting as Margaret opened the album with trembling hands. "I've wanted to tell you this for weeks," she said quietly, "but I was afraid. Afraid of how you might react. Afraid of losing the connection we've built." She turned a page in the album, revealing photos of a younger Margaret with the man Noah recognized as her husband James. "My husband and I had one son, William." She continued, turning another page to show pictures of a serious young man growing from boy to teenager to adult. William was brilliant but headstrong. When he was 23, he fell in love with a young woman we disapproved of. Noah listened intently, unsure where this story was leading, but sensing its importance to Margaret. "Her name was Anna," Margaret said, revealing a photo of a pretty woman with long dark hair and a shy smile. "We thought she wasn't good enough for our William. We were wrong, so terribly wrong, but by the time we realized our mistake, it was too late. William had chosen Anna over us, cutting all ties when we refused to attend their wedding." Margaret's fingers traced the outline of her son's face in the photograph. "Pride is such a destructive force, Noah. My husband and I were too proud to admit we were wrong, too stubborn to bridge the gap our judgment had created." She turned another page, revealing a newspaper clipping. "Local teacher William Whitley and wife die in tragic accident." Noah felt a chill run through him. "I'm so sorry, Margaret." Margaret nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "A car accident, 14 years ago. We didn't even know they had a child until afterward, when the social services contacted us." She turned the page again, revealing a photo of a small boy, perhaps 3 years old, with serious eyes and a solemn expression. "Our grandson," Margaret whispered. "William and Anna's son. My husband was still so angry, so hurt. He refused to take the boy in. Said we were too old, that it would be better for him to be with a younger family." Her voice broke. "I let him make that decision. I let my grandson go to strangers rather than standing up to my husband." Noah stared at the photo of the little boy, a strange ringing in his ears. What happened to him?" Margaret looked up, meeting Noah's eyes directly. "He was adopted by a couple named Bennett. They named him Noah." The world seemed to tilt beneath Noah. He stared at Margaret, unable to process her words, yet somewhere deep inside knowing with absolute certainty that they were true. "No," he whispered. "That's not—" "I would know. My parents would have told me." "Adoptive parents aren't always required to disclose," Margaret began gently. "My dad left." Noah interrupted, his voice rising. "My real dad? He left us 3 years ago." Margaret nodded sadly. "The man who adopted you left. I've spoken with your mother on the phone since my episode yesterday. She confirmed what I suspected. You are my grandson, Noah." Noah stood abruptly, nearly knocking the album to the floor. "This is crazy. You're confused. The medications—" "Noah," Margaret said quietly. "Look at the next page." With shaking hands, Noah turned the page. There, carefully preserved, was a birth certificate. Noah William Whitley, born to William and Anna Whitley 14 years before Noah's current age. "You were 3 when they died," Margaret said softly. "Too young to remember them clearly. The Bennetts adopted you legally, gave you their name. Your mother, Karen, she didn't know about me until yesterday. Your father was the one who handled the adoption. He kept the truth from both of you." Noah backed away from the bed, his breath coming in short gasps. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Why did you wait? All these weeks?" "I was afraid," Margaret admitted, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Afraid you would hate me for not fighting for you back then. Afraid of losing the second chance I never deserved." Noah felt as if he were drowning, memories and questions swirling around him like turbulent waters. I need to think." He turned and fled the room, brushing past a startled nurse in the hallway. He found the stairwell and sat on the cold steps, his head in his hands, trying to make sense of the revelation that had just shattered his understanding of his own life. His grandmother. Margaret was his grandmother. The woman who had shown him kindness, who had listened and understood and valued him. She was his blood relation, a connection to parents he couldn't remember. And she had let him go, had allowed him to be given to strangers rather than taking him in. Yet she had also recognized him somehow, that rainy day at the intersection. Had she known immediately? Or had she suspected gradually, putting together pieces of a puzzle Noah hadn't even known existed? The door to the stairwell opened, and his mother, not his birth mother, but the woman who had raised him, stood there, concern etched on her tired face. "Noah, Margaret told me what happened. Are you okay?" Noah looked up at her, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time in years. The premature lines around her eyes, the gray threading through her hair, the worry that had become a permanent part of her expression. "Did you know?" he asked, his voice cracking. "About Margaret? About my real parents?" His mother sat beside him on the step, leaving a careful space between them. "I knew you were adopted, of course, but your father handled everything. He told me your birth parents died in an accident and there was no family to claim you." She shook her head slowly. "I never knew about Margaret until yesterday, when she called me from the hospital and told me who she was. Why didn't you ever tell me I was adopted?" Noah demanded, anger and hurt bubbling up inside him. "Your father thought it would be easier if you just felt like ours," she said quietly. "And then after he left, I was afraid, Noah. Afraid of losing you too. Afraid you'd feel even more abandoned." Noah absorbed this, trying to reconcile the mother he'd grown distant from with this woman who had feared losing him. "She let me go," he said finally. "Margaret, she let them give me away." "Yes," his mother acknowledged. "She did, and she's lived with that regret every day since." She hesitated, then added, "We all make mistakes with the people we love, Noah. Sometimes terrible ones." Noah thought about Margaret's stories, her kindness, the connection that had formed between them over poetry and soup and quiet afternoons. He thought about the pain in her eyes when she spoke of her son, his father, and the silences that grew too deep to bridge. "She recognized me," he said slowly. "That day in the rain, she knew who I was." His mother nodded. "She suspected," she said. "Your name, your age, your eyes, so like her son's. She created those meetings, those Thursday grocery trips to get to know you. To be sure, why didn't she just tell me?" "Fear," his mother said simply. "The same reason I didn't tell you about being adopted. The same reason people hold back the truths that might hurt the most." She reached out hesitantly, touching his arm. "She loves you, Noah. That much is clear. And she's very ill. Her heart, it's worse than she's admitting." Noah felt tears welling in his eyes, hot and unexpected. "What am I supposed to do with all this? Who am I supposed to be now?" "You're still Noah," his mother said firmly. "Still the boy who loves poetry and has more courage than he gives himself credit for. Still my son, even if I didn't give birth to you." Her voice caught. "And you're also Margaret's grandson, with a history and a connection you never knew you had." Noah wiped at his eyes roughly. "I don't know if I can forgive her for giving me up." "You don't have to decide that today," his mother said gently. "But maybe you could listen to her story, the whole story, before you make up your mind." Noah sat in silence for a long moment, wrestling with emotions too complex to name. Finally, he stood. "I'll talk to her," he said. "I don't promise anything else." His mother nodded, relief visible in her eyes. "That's all anyone can ask." When Noah re-entered Margaret's room, she was still holding the photo album, her expression a mixture of hope and resignation. "I thought you might not come back," she said softly. Noah moved to the chair beside her bed, sitting stiffly. "Mom said I should hear the whole story." Margaret nodded, closing the album and setting it aside. "Where would you like me to begin?" "The beginning," Noah said. "Why you let me go?" Margaret took a deep breath. "After your parents died, James, your grandfather, and I were devastated. Not just by their loss, but by the years of estrangement. All the time we could never get back." Her voice wavered. "When social services contacted us about you, James was nearly 70. I was 68. He said we were too old, that you deserved parents who could run and play, who wouldn't leave you orphaned again in a few years." She looked down at her hands. "I should have fought him. Should have insisted we at least try. But I was broken, Noah. Broken by grief and guilt. I let you go because I believed I didn't deserve a second chance." "So you just forgot about me?" Noah asked, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "Never," Margaret said fiercely. "I kept track of you through legal channels. Knew your new name, your school. I even moved to this building 5 years ago to be closer, though I never approached you. Never interfered, until that day at the intersection," Noah said. Margaret nodded. "I'd seen you before, from a distance, but that day seeing you up close, your eyes are so like William's." She smiled sadly. "I told myself I just wanted to know you a little, to see what kind of young man you were becoming. I never intended to tell you the truth." "Well, what changed?" "My heart," Margaret said simply, gesturing to the hospital room around them. "It's failing, Noah. I don't have much time left, and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving without you knowing who you are. Who I am." Noah felt a cold fear at her words. "You're not dying," Margaret's smile was gentle. We're all dying, dear. Some of us just have a clearer timetable than others. The doctors have been very kind but very clear. Margaret interrupted. My heart is weak. They can manage symptoms but not cure the underlying condition. She reached for his hand. I'm not afraid, Noah. I've lived a long life with great joys and sorrows. My only regret was not knowing you sooner. Noah found himself gripping her hand as if he could somehow anchor her to life through sheer determination. There must be something they can do. Surgeries, transplants. I'm 82, dear. Some options aren't available at my age. Margaret squeezed his hand. But we're not here to talk about my heart. We're here to talk about yours. About whether you can forgive an old woman's terrible mistake. Noah looked at her, really looked at her, and saw beyond the frailty of age to the strength that had sustained her through loss and regret. He saw the woman who had shared poetry and hot chocolate, who had listened without judgment, who had valued his thoughts and dreams when no one else seemed to notice them. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I think I'd like to try. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. That's more than I deserve, she whispered. It's a start, Noah said. We can keep getting to know each other. Keep doing Thursdays. He attempted a smile. You still owe me soup on Friday. Margaret laughed through her tears. Indeed I do. They sat in silence for a moment, hands still clasped. The weight of revelation beginning to settle into something they might eventually navigate together. I have your father's journals, Margaret said finally, and albums. Pictures from when he was your age. When you're ready, I'd like to share them with you. Noah nodded, a lump forming in his throat at the thought of knowing the father he couldn't remember. I'd like that. The nurse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, but Minna, Whitley needs to rest now. Noah stood reluctantly. I'll come back tomorrow, he promised. Maybe bring some of that poetry we were reading. I'd like that very much, Margaret said, her eyes bright with a hope that hadn't been there before. As Noah turned to leave, she called after him. Noah, thank you for helping an old lady cross the street that day. Noah paused in the doorway, looking back at his grandmother, the words still strange in his mind but growing more real by the moment. Thank you for needing help, he replied softly. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of discovery and healing. Margaret remained in the hospital for several days before being released with strict instructions for rest and medication. Noah and his mother arranged for a home health aide to assist her, but it was Noah who took on the role of primary caregiver, stopping by daily to check on her, prepare meals, and most importantly, to talk. Their conversations ranged widely, from Noah's school experiences to Margaret's teaching career, from books they both loved to memories Margaret had of William as a child. She shared albums and journals, helping Noah piece together the history of the family he'd never known. You have his determination, Margaret told him one afternoon as they looked through old school projects William had completed. And his sensitivity, though you hide it better than he did. Noah's relationship with his mother began to heal as well. The truth, painful as it had been, cleared away the fog of unspoken hurts and misunderstandings that had separated them for years. I should have told you, she admitted one evening as they drove home from Margaret's. About the adoption, about everything I knew. Why didn't Dad tell me? Noah asked the question that had haunted him since Margaret's revelation. His mother sighed. Robert wanted you to be entirely ours. He thought a clean break would be better for everyone. She glanced at him. I think in the end, he couldn't bear the thought that you might someday seek out your birth family instead of staying with him. And then he left anyway, Noah said bitterly. Yes, his mother acknowledged. The irony isn't lost on me. At school, something had shifted in Noah's relationship with his peers as well. The confrontation with Jason in the rain had marked a turning point. While they weren't friends, Jason had backed off, and the worst of the bullying had subsided. Noah found himself standing taller in the hallways, speaking up more in class discussions. The changes were subtle but significant, a newfound confidence born of knowing who he was and where he came from. Margaret's health remained fragile. Good days were followed by bad ones, and twice Noah had to call an ambulance when her symptoms worsened suddenly. Each time she rallied, but each recovery was slower than the last. You need to prepare yourself, the doctor told Noah privately after Margaret's third hospitalization. Her heart is failing progressively. We're making her comfortable, but how long? Noah asked, his voice steady despite the pain constricting his chest. Weeks, perhaps. A few months at most. Noah nodded, thanking the doctor mechanically before finding a quiet corner of the hospital where he could absorb this news privately. The thought of losing Margaret so soon after finding her was almost unbearable. Yet he was determined to make whatever time they had left meaningful. When Margaret returned home, Noah redoubled his efforts to care for her. He read to her when she was too tired to hold a book. He helped her sort through old photographs, labeling them with names and dates so the memories wouldn't be lost. And most importantly, he listened as she shared the stories that had shaped her life, and by extension, his own. "I want you to have this," Margaret said one afternoon, pressing a small key into Noah's palm. "It's to a safe deposit box at First National. Everything is arranged, my will, my papers. There's a letter for you there as well, when the time comes." Noah closed his fingers around the key, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "I'm not giving up," Margaret assured him, her smile tired but genuine. "Just being practical. A teacher's habit." "I know," Noah managed. "Thank you." As autumn deepened toward winter, Margaret's strength waned noticeably. She began using a wheelchair for all but the shortest distances. Her appetite diminished, and she tired easily during their conversations. Yet her mind remained sharp, her interest in Noah's life unwavering. "Tell me about school," she would request, and Noah would share stories of his improving grades, his tentative new friendships, his growing passion for writing that she had helped nurture. December brought snow and finals week. Noah studied at Margaret's apartment, reading his English essays aloud for her feedback, working through math problems at her kitchen table while she dozed in her recliner nearby. "You should be home resting," she chided one evening when he arrived looking particularly exhausted. "Not taking care of an old woman." "I am home," Noah replied simply, the truth of the words surprising them both. 2 days before Christmas, Noah arrived at Margaret's apartment with grocery bags and his mother in tow. They had planned a small holiday dinner together, a celebration of their unconventional family. Noah knew something was wrong the moment Margaret opened the door. Her face was ashen, her breathing labored. "I'm fine," she insisted when Noah immediately dropped the bags and moved to her side. "Just a bit tired today." But she wasn't fine. Halfway through dinner, she collapsed, unconscious before Noah could reach her. The ambulance ride was a blur of terror. Noah held Margaret's hand, whispering prayers and promises while paramedics worked around him. At the hospital, she was rushed away, leaving Noah and his mother in the familiar waiting room, clinging to each other in shared fear. Hours passed before the doctor appeared, his expression grave. "She's stabilized," he told them, "but the heart attack was severe. We've made her comfortable, but I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do medically." "She's dying," Noah said, the words hollow in his mouth. The doctor nodded. "Yes, I'm very sorry. Can we see her?" "Of course. She's asking for you." Margaret lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than Noah had ever seen her. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed, monitoring the failing heart that had carried her through 82 years of joy and sorrow. "Noah?" she whispered as he approached, her voice barely audible. "My boy." Noah took her hand gently, afraid the slightest pressure might somehow hurt her. "I'm here, Grandma." It was the first time he had called her that. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "What a gift," she murmured. "To hear that word from you." Noah's mother stood on the other side of the bed, her own eyes wet. "Margaret, the doctors say—" "I know," Margaret interrupted softly. "I've known for some time." Her gaze returned to Noah. "I need you to listen now while I still have the strength." Noah nodded, unable to speak past the grief closing his throat. "Finding you again was the greatest blessing of my life," Margaret said, each word clearly an effort. "These months together, they've been a gift I never deserved but will always treasure." "Me too," Noah managed. "I'm so glad I stopped that day." Margaret smiled faintly. "Not coincidence, I think. Some connections are meant to be, even when we try to break them." She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "You have your whole life ahead of you, Noah. Promise me you'll live it fully. Promise me you'll remember what the poets say, that to love, to connect, even briefly, is worth any pain that follows." "I promise," Noah whispered. "And forgive," Margaret continued, her voice fading. "Forgive your father for leaving. Forgive me for not fighting harder to keep you. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you, so you can move forward unburdened." Noah nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I forgive you," he said, the words emerging from a place of truth he hadn't known existed within him until that moment. "I forgive you, Grandma." Margaret's smile was radiant despite her weakness. "Then I can go in peace." Her gaze shifted to include Noah's mother. "Take care of each other," she said. "You're family now, all the family Noah has. That makes you precious to me." "We will," Noah's mother promised, reaching across the bed to take Margaret's other hand. Thank you for bringing him back to us. Both of us. Margaret nodded slightly, her eyelids growing heavy. I'm very tired now, she whispered, but I think I'll just rest a while with both of you here. Noah sat beside her bed through the night, holding her hand as her breathing grew increasingly labored. His mother dozed in a chair nearby, waking periodically to check on them both. Near dawn, Margaret opened her eyes suddenly, looking past Noah to something only she could see. William, she whispered, a smile of pure joy transforming her face. You came. Her hand tightened briefly around Noah's, and then, with a soft exhalation, Margaret Whitley left to reunite with the son she had lost decades before. Spring came to Oak Ridge Park, the first crocuses pushing through soil still cold from winter. Noah stood at the intersection where he had first met his grandmother, watching as the crossing signal changed from red to white. 6 months had passed since Margaret's death. 6 months of grief and healing, of sorting through her belongings and discovering new connections to his past. The safe deposit box had contained not only legal documents, but letters, dozens of them, written to Noah over the years but never sent. Birthday wishes, Christmas greetings, notes about his academic achievements that she had somehow tracked from a distance. I may have let you go, she had written in the final letter, but I never stopped loving you. Noah adjusted the backpack on his shoulder, feeling the weight of the poetry journal inside. His own writing now, inspired by Margaret's collection and encouraged by his English teacher, who had recognized a genuine talent in the quiet student who had suddenly found his voice. The intersection was busy with afternoon traffic. Noah noticed an elderly man hesitating at the curb, checking the crossing signal repeatedly with obvious anxiety. Without hesitation, Noah approached him. Excuse me, sir? Would you like some help crossing? The man looked up in surprise, then smiled with visible relief. That would be very kind, young man. These intersections get more frightening every year. Noah offered his arm, adjusting his pace to match the older man's slower steps. I'm Noah, he said as they walked. George, the man replied. George Wilson. I'm headed to the community center for chess club. Do you play? Noah shook his head. Never learned, actually. Well, if you have time, I'd be happy to teach you. We're always looking for young people to join us. Noah considered the offer, thinking of homework waiting at home and dinner with his mother later. But he also thought of Margaret, of connections made and lost, of opportunities that might not come again. I'd like that, he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. I'd like that very much. As they reached the opposite curb, Noah glanced back at the intersection where his life had changed with a simple act of kindness. Somewhere he thought Margaret was smiling. The bullied teen who had helped an elderly lady cross the street, never knowing she was his long-lost grandma, had found not just his family history, but himself in that chance encounter. And in that discovery lay the most important lesson Margaret had taught him, that even in our most isolated moments, we are connected by invisible threads of love and history and possibility, waiting only for the courage to reach out and take someone's hand.